Welcome to Presente, a space and community that vibes on being in the moment, something we are relearning how to do in a fast-moving world.
We are excited to be part of a growing movement that talks about topics that we feel haven't been talked about in our Latin culture and womanhood.
Be present with us. Take a pause and break down societal norms.
Redefine the meaning of existing. Welcome to Presente, the podcast.
For today's episode, we discuss the term adulting. We are all adulting, the good, the bad, and the ugly of adulting. The term adulting. Adulting is the assumption of tasks, responsibilities, and behaviors traditionally associated with normal grown-up life, along with the implication that the individual in question does not particularly identify as an adult and that acting as one does not come naturally. This term is credited to writer Kelly Williams Brown.
We are all adulting. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of Presente. We are excited to have you back on the podcast. The episode is on adulting and how we are all going through the phases of adulting. You start off as a kid, and by the time you know it, you are a fully responsible, disciplined adult. And as my co-host Jennifer says, the same way we're doing this podcast to get the episodes out every week is the same way, we have to have discipline for all things and aspects of our life. So I'm just going to explain the way that I saw adulting, at least as a back then. As a child, I always saw adults do, quote unquote, what they wanted and not understanding them when they said that being a kid is better. This is something I actually understand now. Younger me at some point also felt like adulting was a trap. When I was young, I spoke about this in the Spiritual Awakening episode in episode 3. When I was looking at photos of when I was a baby, I remember feeling like, wow, one day, it will be my turn to experience life and to feel responsible, and not understanding what that was. I think I, just felt this whirl of feeling overwhelmed. I just realized, looking at my baby photos, I wasn't ready to say goodbye yet. And then I started to cry from this overwhelming rush, that eventually this part of myself would later unfold, as it does for all of us. By the time, though, that I was 17, 18 years old, though, I completely forgot about that feeling. And, as the promised dream, which is America, the American dream, was awaiting me in just a few short years post-college. Being the first woman in my family to get my degree, a paper that would support the journey ahead. Back then, it all seemed that mattered. Listening to others talk about adulting and going through college on TikTok, I feel that connection is a solid one. We are all going through that phase where we're not sure, like, we get this paper that's supposed to support the journey, yet it doesn't feel like we're, supporting or thriving. It feels like more we're surviving. So I'll get back to that in a second. I remember back then too, I really wanted to thrive in life. I really wanted to go further. When I was young, I used to tell my mom, I think I was like maybe 8 years old or 9 years old. I was like, Mom, I'm going to get my master's degree too. Because back then, when you're a kid, my mom's like, why don't you get your bachelor's degree, go to your 4 years, do your 4 years of college. And I'm like, what's a master's degree? I'm like, I don't know, but I want to be a master at something. And I did, I did get my master's degree, and that was really, joyous, and it was great. I felt great for having to accomplish that. But then when it came time to looking, for work, that's when I started to realize that, hey, the adulting part of life is not the straight path society laid out for me. Have a job, in your early 20s, and I'm talking about full-time job with like 9 to 5 salary, high paying job, benefits, all of this, you know, having my life together by the time I was 30. Supposedly, you know, I thought, you know, being married and having a house and all of these timelined experiences that we're supposed to all go through. But the reality is there's a lot of people on this planet. We don't all do things the same, and that's okay. It constructs our paths, it redirects us in our journey. Here, you know, I'm 33 years old. I'm renting, you know, I'm facing inflation just like everyone else. I'm hearing, you know, my millennial generation. I'm hearing the Gen Z generation. And I'm looking at the future and I'm questioning everything. You know, this life we're meant to live. Adulting is strange things. I remember talking to my dad, just feeling like really overwhelmed. And I was kind of laying there like a log. And I'm like, Dad, I just feel like adulting is so weird. My dad's like, yep, I don't know. He's like, it just goes by so quick. And I'm like, it does. And I don't know. Recently, I came upon a TikTok video where most people were talking about work and how everything feels like a transaction. Our very life feels like a transaction, that we are mostly working to survive rather than to thrive, right? Supposedly, when we get the 9 to 5 job, when we get, you know, the salary with benefits, you know, with everything, you know, yes, we might have opportunity to build on a life, but with everything going up in expenses, most of us are feeling that rush of repeating the cycle, this overwhelm. Many of us are feeling tired from that repetition of life. It feels like, you know, 75% of our life is work, but honestly, it feels more like it's 99% of our life. Half our day is work. And, you know, the biggest lie of America is, oh, hey, you know, until you're, you know, 65, this is when you can enjoy life. But, you know, most of us are not even enjoying right now because, well, not all of it, but, you know, it's hard to enjoy it when everything just kind of feels like it's piling on top of one another. And that's hard. We face this repetition of going to work, coming home. By the time we get home, we already have to prepare for the next day, right? Most of us probably get home around 6, 7 p.m., leaving us only a few short hours to reset our day or reset our time, to be mindful in the small amount of hours, which feels like minutes, just to do it all over again. I really feel like it needs to change. We are living in an outdated system. But I just want to go on and say that we want to build lives, we want to build dreams. But sometimes, again, with everything feeling like a transaction, it feels so hard to do that. I want to end this segment with saying that I am glad for the floodgates of social media, because people are connected by the art of living and noticing. And that is the power of adults who are spiritually awake or woken. We aim to experience life differently rather than just settling for this matrix society that we live in. We, you know, are more open to knowledge because of social media. We are sharing ways to build wealth while we sleep. I really love that this has become a tool for us to spread, to build more equity through all around us. You know, we're aiming, you know, to live life differently. To the adults who are in tune with their soul and are awake, thank you for sharing your waves of empathy, your lows and your highs, and the power to help the vast majority. Keep going. You know, something my co-host and I were talking about is there's tons of galaxies out in the universe, and somehow we ended up in the one with the 40-hour work week. Thank you, Jennifer, for sharing that with me.
Oh, it's just a daily reminder. Apparently, we settled for this one, this galaxy. We are all adulting, and I feel like I have been adulting forever. I heard this term years ago, probably in my mid 20s, so like in the mid 2010s, amongst my girlfriends and social media. Then and now, I didn't like this term, perhaps because I actually could relate to it, but also just feeling like I didn't need to be labeled or to even have that reminder. After all, I actually adulted early on before most people in my age group, just to toot my own horn here. But by the age of 18, 19 years old, I was already doing the most in a way, or just settling into my adulting phase. By 18, 19 years old, I was working a full-time job. I was going to college as well, full time. I was paying my own bills as well, helping out with things at my parents' household until I then was able to get my own apartment at the age of 19. Those were all little ways in which, compiled together, led me into this adulting stage. For the most part, I think, I can speak for myself where I matured at a very young age. Being the eldest of three, I had to take care of my siblings. So I didn't really have much of a social life outside of school while being in like middle school and high school. For the most part, I was my mother's backbone and just helping with things in the household, whether it was chores or babysitting my siblings, running errands. Those were very early on, hands-on, full experience that I had to pretty much make me to mold me who I am today, settling into the real world where I then got a job and was paying bills as well as going to school and having my own apartment in Manhattan. Those were just ways of like easing my transition on over from being the eldest sibling to then now having this sense of independency. And I was very proud of all of my efforts and hard work. It felt like it was paying off because, once again, many that were in my age group at the time didn't really have that lifestyle that I had. Many others in my age group were, either living at home with their parents or working part-time jobs or looking for work or receiving, who knows, an allowance perhaps, or away at college, doing the whole dorm life. And I didn't get to experience any of that. For me, it started right out of high school, just entering the real world, helping out in minor ways with bills at home. But even prior to all of that, just being the eldest, having that sense of responsibility to care for my siblings as well as keep my home intact, those contributed to me entering this adulting phase. So when I heard the term adulting, I must have been in my mid-20s by then. I was just like, are we really talking about this? Is this like really a thing? Like what just happened to actually being an adult? Like I'm an adult. I don't need to be told, or, are you adulting? It just sounded really silly to me. I didn't care for it. I just thought that while others were associating and their lives to this term or way of living, I've been there, done that. So it didn't necessarily faze me. To a certain extent, kind of bothered me because now you're labeled in a sense, or the comparisons come in. Whereas I always just lived my life according to doing my best, regardless of like whatever point in time I was in. For the most part, I think that a lot of people that were now all of a sudden in their 20s, 30s, quote unquote, adulting, it felt like for them perhaps was doing like the right thing or being like on this timeline of how you should live your life. Whereas for me, I had been there, done that at a very earlier young age. And just thinking back at it, my mom and those that I look up to in my family, we were forced to grow up, be an adult at a very young age. I can always hear my mom telling me at a young age, by like the age of 12, she was already cooking and cleaning for the family back home in Dominican Republic. And I hear those stories quite often from my grandmother and my aunts. And it's like now people are like 30 years old learning how to cook or making a meal for themselves or their families. And, not that I'm knocking out anyone for that, but it just goes to show like the difference in reciprocation to growing up. I wasn't necessarily raised that way. So when I heard this term adulting, I was baffled by it. I just thought like, please save it for someone else, because I've been already making moves, doing the best that I can, and I don't need to be placed into this conversation amongst those that are just now catching up. That was just my take on it. Took a lot of determination and being focused and just, knocking out goals to realize like, oh my goodness, I'm actually growing up. And needless to say, time is flying by and I'm doing the damn thing. I am working. I am waking up early and going to work and doing the best that I can. I am receiving a paycheck and saving money. I have a 401k, healthcare, my own apartment, going to college, and I was living it. I'm still am living it. I no longer go to college, but it's like in the midst of it all, it was more so of just, making a life for myself and being able to knock out goals. Obtaining a bachelor's, a master's degree was something early on that I was determined to do to make my mother proud, my parents, being that it was a topic of conversation growing up, going to school, receiving an education, but then even narrowing it down furthermore once I found a sense of identity. The terms in terms and condition in like the whole conversation about college and university, whether to attend or not to attend, that's completely up to you. I was actually someone who did attend and always been a student learner. I enjoy it, but that was a hard decision to make. And that in itself was also adulting. You'd now have to pick out schedules and try to work your life around all these things that you want to be a part of. But I think that, adulting is hard. It's not completely easy. As many goals that I've scratched off my list, it hasn't always been easy. It is a work in progress. It has its good days and its bad days. It is a lot of hard work, of a lot of making hard and tough decisions. And I think that when this term rolled out, adulting, it sort of applied furthermore pressure onto people, especially if you were like in your 20s and your 30s. And I wonder if possibly even in your 40s, would you still be adulting, quote unquote? Like, when does it stop? I hope it stops by you not feeling like you're on this timeline and you're constrained to it. Like you have to have a house by a certain age or be married by a certain age or have children by a certain age. I know as women, that pressure lies a little bit heavier on our shoulders and in our minds. It's living in there every passing year thinking like, is my window of opportunity closing in? But that added pressure should, try to dismiss it, try to, distance yourself from that and really just focus in on yourself, the joys of life. I know adulting is hard. There's tons of responsibilities that come with it, from keeping yourself safe, keeping yourself on top of your bills, having a nice, healthy and good living environment. And the list goes on and on. The truth of it all is adulting is hard, but do not allow like the weight and the blueprint of what society or your social circle or even family members, like do not allow that to really impose on the decision making on how you want to live your life. Everybody goes through this phase at some point in their life, and I think it's good to keep in mind that when you can say for yourself it wasn't easy, then you should know for the next person that may, apply just as much. So this term should be, handled very loosely, not taken too serious. And I know it can be hard given that we have to, put in our 40-hour work weeks, more or less, and have the responsibilities of putting, food on the table and a roof over our heads. So I know that it's not easy. It has difficulties. Just know that can, in between, you can still live your life in better terms when it comes to the things that you like enjoy. Just want to set your goals, set your dreams and stuff. Don't allow the reality of it to distract you from, I guess, what's important to yourself. It can be a lot of talks behind it. There can be a lot of side eyes and comments while you are trying to live your life on your terms, but that's totally fine. That's totally okay. Not everyone is meant to get you, and you're not always going to be liked or for everyone. And that's totally fine. Just, shrug it off and, don't let this adulting phase take over.
Thank you for reminding us the positive light about, adulting and envisioning, the pathway that we all want to build upon. That is a great reminder. And again, it goes, back to the art of us, as humans, building towards those dreams, even though it is very challenging in the world we live in. But the fact of the matter is that it's always been challenging to adult. And sometimes being an adult is questionable. Like, I know it means responsibility, it means discipline, but when does it actually feel like it? And by the way, other stuff that you brought up too was from past generations, like our parents, like when you were mentioning how, your mom had to grow up at the age of 12. It was very similar for my mother in Honduras as well. My grandmother had 8 children, and my mother was the second oldest. My aunt that lives in Honduras, she was the first oldest, and the two of them, along with my third aunt, I have 8 aunts, 6 aunts. It's crazy. They all had to learn how to adult very quickly and help my grandmother around the farm, because my grandmother owned a farm in Honduras. And when my mother came to this country, she wanted my brother and I to, yes, be responsible people, by instilling values in us to be able to adult and, to plan ahead and to, set ourselves for a comfortable future. She also wanted us to enjoy being, her kids, because she didn't have that when she grew up, because my grandmother, wanted her to, and my other aunts and my uncles, to help around, the farm, and to, they lived in separate areas as they started to become teenagers and in their early 20s. So seeing that my mom wanted a different life for us, which is why, when she came to America, she, I was the oldest as well. And, she wanted us to have those values too, but to also, live life in a way that was, still being a kid, and then eventually finding our way to adulthood. So I want to say thank you for mentioning that, because I have forgotten that part about my mother. It was a good reminder to where our hard work and values stem from.
Yes, we cannot forget so much about our upbringing, as much as while we try to work on the daily and the future things to come. I always keep that in mind, just how dedicated my mother was to raising us, but yet, being the woman she is and all the hard work that she put into things. And I always admired it. And I always thought, like, damn, how does she do it? And to know that, that's part of life. And I think it's interesting that we chose this topic, adulting, during this time of year. It is the beginning of December. And
Mm.
the beginning of the month is usually like, okay, you got all these bills to pay, you got to set money aside to this, you got to pay off that, it's also right in time for the holidays. So just a lot of preparation and planning behind it. So adulting is not easy, guys. It's definitely not. It also means don't stop having fun. Like, you can still have fun. You should just to de-stress and be a little bit relaxed, not live so much on edge of having to be in the daily routine of things. So just a reminder, it's okay to be adulting, but at the same time, let's not forget to just enjoy ourselves. One thing also is that around this topic, while we were figuring out, like, okay, what are we going to discuss on today's episode, I happened to come across a short story on Humans of New York on Instagram. If you have not checked out Humans of New York on Instagram, I recommend you do. I mean, I am fascinated to hear all these short stories of just random people in New York City in all facets of life. So, what this page does, and the creator, is basically gather short stories. It's created by Brandon Stanton. He's basically gathered a nice following here, just giving snippets of random people in New York and their life or what they're going through. And he has this beautiful way of incorporating the images to the stories of individuals. And the most recent one, which is why I bring this up, is this lady, and I don't know her name precisely. It doesn't mention on his short story here, but she's basically talking about being in her 40s, having 3 kids, a full-time job, a husband, and how evolved her life has been from being a kid to a teenager to now a mom and an adult. And I just want to take a quote from something that Brandon Stanton quoted her. I'm just going to read it very briefly to you. It says, "Everything just changes so fast, you know? When you're a little kid and you turn into a teenager, it's like, oh, I'm changing now. But you've been coached. You're prepared for it. Then you go from teenager to college. That's a big change. Then from college into your 20s. Still changing. But at some point, you kind of feel like I'm an adult and I'm done. But you just keep going." And I think that's what it is, those earlier footsteps into becoming an adult, I guess, is part of what we're talking about here, this whole terminology of adulting. But like, once you're in it and you're in the driver's seat, you're an adult and you just roll with it. You roll with whatever comes your way. You plan for it, big or small, it doesn't matter. But you sort of set some type of tone on, life events and life changes. And some of them are unpredictable, but needless to say, you just ease your way into it somehow and figure things out as you go. I think that it's funny when we're kids. I remember just looking at my parents and think, or adults in general, and thinking like, wow, they got their shit together. Like,
Oh my God.
wow,
Yep.
right? Like, wow, they got their shit together. Or when I grow up and I'm going to have a car, and wow, I'm going to live here, or I'm going to do things this way. And then you become an adult yourself and you're like, wait, this what it's all about? You got to work every day. You got to pay bills every 30-day cycle, whatever it is. It's kind of being like on this hamster wheel, but it's really up to you to not lose sight of, your environment and the road ahead. Hopefully it's a bright one. Those are my hopes to you all, as well as you, Gisela, and myself. Don't lose sight of that. Just try to make the best of it. That's all I can really leave you all with, and not to feel so constrained by real life demands. I know it's hard. You got this. The good, the bad, and the ugly of adulting. So, what are some of the things in terms of adulting, the good, the bad, and the ugly? I'd say the no need to have permission or a curfew. Definitely setting boundaries. We were trying to think of stuff here of what are some positives about adulting. I guess planning ahead for the life that you want or deserve, being able to just have some sense of freedom as well are some good things and qualities of adulting. You can always just close the door if you don't want to have guests over.
Yep.
you know
So some things I wrote, the good part about adulting is the power of humanity. How when something is unjust in the world, we come together to use our voices to give those that do not have justice, letting them know that we are there to stand with them and to do whatever measures we can to support one another. So right now the world is going through upheaval and turmoil with the war happening in Gaza and all the civilians and lives that are being lost in Palestine and all these atrocities we're hearing about. But I really love that many people are speaking about this. So yes, the power of humanity is the good thing about adulting. We're able to use our voices to help each other during times of peril. The bad side of adulting is the bills, like Destiny's Child.
Bills. I like that song, but I wonder why. I saw a meme and it says, "Why don't bills ever go on sale?" Like, or on a little discount, like give me a little 10-20% off the bill, off the rent, off the car note, like whatever, please. That'd be great.
It's like if you pay your rent for a year, I feel like we deserve like a 30-50% off, for at least for a month.
Something, right?
Can we get that? Oh Lord. So we just want to end this episode with thank you for listening to the episode of Adulting. Thank you if you've made it this far within the episode. I just want to say, dear America, there are no timelines. Not anymore. So please stop imposing your timeline on the 7 million billion, not sure, people that live in this world. We each have our own meaning of what success personally means to all of us. As my co-host Jennifer says, we were all born with something unique. May we use our power, our awakenings, our ancestral lineage to get to the places where we want to be. Keep saying your piece. Keep saying, your real feelings, because speaking our truth, even though our voices are going to shake, that is where change lies. And that is how we bring about change to this universe. Yes, adulting is hard. And I'm glad to see more people speaking up on it and us finding ways to communicate this ridiculously outdated society that we live in together to push forward for new beginnings within our society. Success truly is what one feels like it should be. It is the feeling of bringing you closer to peace and you feeling that within your mind, your body, and your soul. Many of us are feeling the pushback of daily life and routine. Once again, by using our voice, like this podcast, we are able to bring change, or at least be willing to open to discussion about them. Thank you for listening to episode 4 of Presente.
Thank you for tuning in to our segment on adulting. As mentioned, please be sure to follow Humans of New York on Instagram.